So my name is Hillary Kane, and I'm a Green in Philadelphia. I am a longtime Green Party member, and for the purposes of tonight's call, I'm the co-chair of the Coordinated Campaign Committee, or the CCC. I also happen to be the national treasurer, so I could always do a plug for donating money to the Green Party, but I won't do that tonight. Mostly I wanted to just get us started, and we'll open the floor. We're doing an open call-in tonight where we don't necessarily have a formal agenda planned, though we do have materials that we can share, and we did want to focus this call, given that it's still relatively early in the year, to focus on what we call early campaign development. So the things you might be doing at this time of the year, as opposed to, let's say the late October, for example. So we've had some folks introduce themselves. We could go kind of around the room, so to speak, and have folks introduce themselves, just say who you are and where you're from, and if you happen to be running for office, that would be great. We would love to know that and what office you are running for. So let's start, was it Stoney, who is in Bellingham, Washington? I want to start from the northwest down to the southeast and see if we can do that.
Yeah, so my name is Stoney Bird. I live in, as Hillary said, I live in Bellingham, Washington. I'm in the 2nd Congressional District in Washington, and I'm planning to run for Congress in the 2nd Congressional District. And I've begun some of the early campaign steps, or the sort of pre-campaign steps. Maybe that's enough for now.
Yep, that's good. Keep it short so we can move it along. All right, anyone else sort of in the northwest quadrant of the country? All right, southwest.
Laura.
Yeah, let's take our New Mexico folks.
Hi, my name is Laura Suazo, and I'm a campaign manager.
Great. All right. M?
M. Ward from Albuquerque, New Mexico, and I'm also a member of the CCC.
Great, welcome. All right, and then once we get through introductions, I'm going to ask that people put themselves on mute so that we don't hear sirens and barking dogs and babies crying and taking out the trash or whatever is going on in the background. All right, anyone in the mountain time zone? All right, moving east to the plains and the Midwest.
This is Holly Hart in Iowa City.
That counts, great.
Joe Crane, Kansas City.
Fabulous. Anyone north, Minnesota area, Midwest? All right, let's hit the Northeast.
I'm Barbara Barry from Connecticut. I'm running for state senate position, which covers southern half of Hartford, which is our capital, and 5/6 of Wethersfield, kind of living, which is a suburban town.
Great. All right, anybody else in New England?
Sandy Prisblack, New York. Ran for town council last year, and I'm going to run next year.
Great. All right.
Jason Apollonik from Rochester, New York.
Fabulous. Also on the CCC. And the rest of the Mid-Atlantic. So I'm from Philly, as I said, and maybe John, you're up.
Hey, John Foreman from Kensington, Maryland, just outside of Washington, D.C.
Great. And anyone else?
My name is Ben Williamson. I'm from Asheville, North Carolina. I'm considering potentially running in a year or two's time, so I'm here mainly just to listen and learn. I'm co-chair of the Western North Carolina Green Party.
Fabulous. Learning early is always a good thing. All right, and now since we've moved south, anyone else in the rest of the South, deep or otherwise? All right. So we're going to get started and just, I think, open up the floor. What I might do is share my screen for those of you. Hello, yes, welcome.
I didn't get to introduce myself.
No, please do.
This is Carol Bolden. I'm in Southern California. I'm running for state assembly.
Great. And Carol, I deleted your Twitter from our records.
Great. Thank you.
No problem. All right, welcome. So I was just saying that, this is an open call-in. We don't necessarily have a formal, presenter or anything. So, but we did want to try to focus on early campaign types of things. And so what I mean by that is like initial goal setting for your campaign, thinking about your resources, assessing those resources, building a campaign team, maybe planning kickoff events, developing a budget. Those were sort of the highlights. We're not going to go through any kind of formal presentation, but if people had questions pertaining to any of those things, now is the time to ask, and we'll do our best to raise hands and see who call on folks. And we have multiple members of the CCC on the call, and I know we also have people who have run for office on the call, and so I know that among us, the wisdom is there. And then of course if you have questions about any other part of campaigning, feel free to ask. So with that, I'm gonna see who might want to go first.
So how do you open up an account?
I'm sorry, what was that?
How do you open up an account, a campaign account?
A bank account. So
right.
It varies. And so, okay, so opening a bank account generally is pretty standard. In my experience, you first have to set up your campaign as a legal entity, which typically means filing with either your county or your state board of elections, depending on what level of office you're running for. And so here in Pennsylvania, and one of the, just sidebar, the beauty of our federal system is that 50 states do it in 50 different ways, plus the District of Columbia. And then within states, different municipalities and different counties have different laws. So everything I say, if it has to do with campaign finance or getting on the ballot, realize that it is more, in my experience, asterisk, and please, please, please double check with your own state party, your own state board of elections, your county, etc. But in my experience, you file some paperwork that says, oh, we've created the committee to elect Joe, or whatever, whatever you're calling it, and this committee is going to try to elect Joe for Senate, and somebody, I think, has me on the computer and on the phone, so there's an echo. So anyway, you file the paperwork to get your campaign started, and that in some ways is akin to like articles of incorporation if you were a business or any type of other organization. And then usually you can take that paperwork along with getting an EIN number from irs.gov, so getting an employee identification number from the IRS website. You bring those two things into any bank branch, and they're usually able to create a bank account for you.
Holly Stack?
Yes, Holly, who's my other go-to person for finance stuff.
So my process is a little bit different, but it's the same kind of stuff. And so you should check if you have to do something within your county or whatever first. But generally, the first thing you have to do is get your bank statement. You get the IRS number, and you can actually call them or do it online. There's one thing you need to be aware of. In order to do that, it's an EIN, employee ID number, tax number, even if you don't have employees. But one thing that will happen is that you need to have the or a name of the candidate in the title of your organization, and you want to, and it can't match. It can't be identical to another campaign. So, for instance, I had one that was a Gary guy named Gary Klein, and there were too many Kleins there was already a Klein for council, so we had Gary Klein for council. It's that kind of thing, and then they'll flag and pop up. So you want to give some thought to this. You want for the name, you also want to think about, usually it's the last name or both names. If you have a guy named Bradley and another guy named Bradley and one is the first and last name, you probably want to use the first and last name. But it's one thing to, if you're Cher or Madonna, you could use your first name, but probably the last name is better, or both. The other thing is think about when you're running for something, many times people will put, Brown for council, or one was Wright for Iowa City. His name was W-R-I-G-H-T, but he did that right for Iowa City, running for council. If you put, you cannot, let's see, I want to say, if you want to use that campaign fund and you think you might want to run for a different office, you might want to do something like one candidate we have, elect Clara Olson. And she was running for State House, but she might have wanted to do something else. Otherwise, when you have to dissolve that campaign fund and set up a new name if you want to run for something else. But if you think you're only going to ever want to run for council or water board or whatever, then putting the name of that particular race that position is good. The other thing I would avoid unless you're running for president is putting the date on, because maybe you run for city council, you don't make it this time, or you do make it and you're going to run again. And so you don't want to have, elect Lester 08 or 18 and then be running in 2020. So just give some thought to the name. Once you register the EIN number, then you can go to the bank. And I do recommend look carefully at what kind of accounts you get. Note whether or not I don't know why this is, okay, Note whether you're going to be paying anything per check, and also note whether you are going to be earning interest on it. I once had a nervous collapse because I came up with 18 cents more than what I was actually showing in my own spreadsheet, but because it had earned 18 cents of it, something like that. So you want to know what kind of account you get, and when you order checks, I strongly recommend ordering the carbon checks. That gives you an extra record. It costs a little bit, but you have an extra record of all the checks that go out and that record. So I think that's everything. But first time I did it, I knew nothing. It was the bank that told me what to do, so that was helpful. But
that's great. And I guess one other thing is that depending on the local laws and what you're running for, I know here in Pennsylvania, if you, I think, raise and spend, maybe it's either less than $250 or less than $500, then you kind of don't need to do any of this stuff, and you can run it in and out of your own personal checking account. I don't necessarily recommend that. A, because I want you to run a serious campaign where you're raising more than $500, and B, because when you ask people to write checks to your campaign and donate, this is the name that what Holly's talking about. This is the name that people are going to write on that check, pay to the order of. I'm a big fan. We always do friends of. I was Sherry's treasurer when she ran for sheriff. Friends of Sherry Honkala. 5 years later, she decided to run for state rep. It was literally the same bank account, same organization. We had never disbanded it, and we dusted it off and used it again. But it's a little weird, especially if you're running one of those small dollar races, to say, please make your check out to me personally. That just something seems weird about that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
All right, that was a great question.
One more thing I do want to mention, and one thing Hillary mentioned, because it may be different in her state than it is in mine, but obviously make sure you know what you need to do in your state. In mine, there are campaign finance, ethics and campaign finance disclosure boards, and you want to be in touch with them and set up whatever reporting. It's mostly done online now, but just make sure, sometimes your Secretary of State or Board of Elections start there, and they'll tell you, we don't do that, but this office does. And so then you contact, in some states, in my state, the offices were very helpful. In yours, they might be a complete, and you'll know in your state if you have a corrupt system that you'll want to have some legal help or something. But just make sure you know what you need to do in your state.
Right. You don't want to find out 5 months later that you should have been collecting some piece of information for every donation that you don't have. So definitely, and then also there might be rules. I think here you can't collect money until you've officially declared that you're running for office. But you or I think it's if you have to declare that you're running within 10 days of receiving your first donation. I mean, there's all kinds of rules around that kind of thing as well. All right, Holly and I could talk about this stuff forever, so let's move on to another question.
Hi, Barbara Stack.
Yep, Barbara.
I just want to add, it sounds like you didn't mention that some states require a treasurer if you're going to raise more than the minimum amount of money that you guys are going to talk about. And I think you are great in focusing on take meticulous notes about where the checks are coming from, because after you one cent over whatever you don't have to file for. If you get 1 cent more than that, you do have to file, and you're going to have that documentation retroactively to provide now. So, and if somebody has any expertise about treasury work and stuff like that, how to be a treasurer, that would be great. Some of our banking facilities charge different fees for a political party, because they think we're Democrats and Republicans, so they like to tell us we have to have a minimum deposit and big fees, but you'll find out when you ask.
Great, thanks for that.
Okay, I have a question.
All right.
I was wondering if you have a form, that would be easily adaptable, to collect the information that we need from people that donate.
Yes. So one of the things that we've been trying to do on the CCC is assemble all kinds of paperwork, forms, budgets, flyers, everything that people have used in previous campaigns. And I think I'm sure we can find someone who has what I would call a donation slip. So things that, you might physically pass out at a fundraising event where people are writing down either, their name and address, and often it's occupation and employer. That's the required information, as well as saying, yes, I'm donating $50 or, checking off different amounts kind of thing, or putting credit card information. So I'm sure we can find someone who's got a template for that. And then I have, and it's basically a Google spreadsheet, what I've used in the past to be a treasurer, and I have it set up where it looks like a check ledger. And so that's sort of my general ledger of all the money coming in, all the money going out. And then I have another tab that's basically all the donor information. And so it really just depends on how sophisticated, there's different kinds of systems now that track money, like Nation Builder, for example, is both a website, a people manager, and will also, track donations. So it could be duplicative to have a separate spreadsheet for that. But if you're not using a system like that and you're just sort of doing it, kind of the old-fashioned way, that can also be a simple and easy tool.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, I think a lot of times, I know this is the situation with me, that I set up a CrowdPack site for donations, but there have been a number of people, I've had a few little fundraisers, and people have given me money directly. Even when I was out getting signatures to get on the ballot, people would hand me a 10 or something, so you get money coming to you different ways. CrowdPack uses a democracy engine for their payment as their payment processor, and they're the ones that apparently collect the donor information for you. But if they're giving money to you directly, it's what I'm what I'm concerned about is because I can look to them for that information for people who've given to my campaign on CrowdPack.
Right. Right. So the person who hands you a 10, in different states will have different things to say about that. And if you're running for Congress, the FEC has something to say about that, which could be very different. But generally speaking, there should be, I'm not familiar with CrowdPack, I've never used it, but there should be a way to possibly log a check or a cash donation. Like if you're using it to capture all of your donor data, there should be a way to sort of manually enter. And then if not, then you have to have your own system where at the end of the day when you report to whatever, your county or state, you will be combining, like you're going to download from CrowdPack all the information it has and then add the information you have for people who wrote checks or gave you cash.
Right, that's what I think I'm going to have to do. I don't think they have a way to input,
So anyway, I have this financial template, and what I'm going to do is link to it from the CCC webpage on gpus.org. And what I can also do is share my screen. And people can, this is the kind of thing. And we truly don't have to spend the whole time talking about finances and budget, but if that's what people's questions are. So if you're logged into the computer, you should be able to see what I'm looking at, which is basically a generic Google spreadsheet. This is sort of, it's a pretty general basic check ledger, and you can set up formulas so that as you do things, you just sort of keep dragging down the formula, and it will keep giving you a total. And then, realize you have to keep track of in-kind donations generally. So if someone, pays for something directly instead of giving you the money and you paying for it, they paid for food for a fundraiser, or they paid for, an advertisement, anything that they laid the money out and then never got reimbursed and intended that to be a donation, that's an in-kind, and you typically have to report that as well in the same manner. And then there's like a tab for donors, just, like name, address, city, state, zip, employer, and then like, did you thank them? Thank your donors. It doesn't have to be a handwritten note every time, though I would certainly, anybody who's donating large amounts, and large is defined however you define it, that might necessitate a handwritten thank you from the candidate or a phone call. But, Nation Builder, CrowdPack, all those places will send automatic, emailed thank yous. But think about your system for the cash and for the check donations, who's taking care of those. And it shouldn't be you as the candidate because you've got more important things to do.
Yeah.
All right.
Do you know how you figure out the in-kind donations? You have to figure out, like, what the monetary value is?
Yeah, I mean, generally speaking, if there's a receipt involved, so like small things like I'm the treasurer and I do the thank you letters and I go and buy postage and I'm not requesting reimbursement, right? But I have a receipt for the postage that I just bought, that's an in-kind donation. Things that it's really hard to assign a monetary value for, you can probably just ignore. But you might have someone who's like giving you office space for an office that is valued at $1,000 a month, and they're giving it to you for $200 a month. Well, that's an in-kind donation of $800. It's sort of a case by case, but there should be some way of easily assessing the value of something. I mean, you shouldn't have to do extensive research, but people have receipts. That's always the easiest and the best because then you have documentation.
Mhm. Yeah. Okay. Can you tell us what the URL is that you're...
Yeah, so gpus.org is more of our internal facing website, so it's for caucuses and committees. and it has a lot of information for those of us who are actively involved in the party. And so on gpus.org, you would click on committees and then navigate to the CCC, the Coordinated Campaign Committee. And then I think we have a document section, so I'll sort of throw it up there. We probably need a big reorganization of our website.
So I have a question.
Yep, Stoney, go right ahead.
Where do you find a treasurer?
Anyone want to take this?
I would. I'll tell you one thing I found, even though there seems to be a lot of bits and pieces and all kinds of stuff, if you have somebody who is reliable and responsible and attentive to detail, but may not have tons and tons of time to do a lot of other stuff, it really wants to help out the cause. It's a good thing. It's a good thing to do. It doesn't. It's not. I've not found it to be super time consuming, especially if you keep records as you go. I think it's a good way. It's needed. Make sure the person is reliable and not going to just kind of disappear and not be in communication for big periods of time. I believe it's a good idea always to make sure that more than one person is able to sign a check, so that if they do, then the campaign has access to the funds. But I think the person who one thing we found here too also is easy access to the bank. I did several campaigns and I can just walk to my bank, and then sometimes it depends. That may not be being needed, but that's one thing to think about.
Yeah, I mean, in general, you find a treasurer like you find any other volunteer. You ask, and I, do not underestimate the value of asking and the need to ask. And what I'm about to say is going to sound really harsh, and I'm not intending it to be this way, but I want people to have a serious, to think about this. If you can't find 3 to 5 people to volunteer for your campaign and to take you seriously and to commit to you as a volunteer, then you really need to think about your leadership skills and whether or not you have what it takes to run for office and be elected. And so, I mean, what I mean by that is if you, at some level, this is about you and your personality and your, that je ne sais quoi, that you're inspiring other people to say, I've got this. I can be the next city council person. I can be the next congressperson. Come join me. And if you can't inspire someone to volunteer to be your treasurer, then you might need to rethink your strategy, your pitch, all that kind of thing. But it is work. And so I'm not, it's not an easy job and it shouldn't be taken lightly. But, attracting volunteers is one of the first things you're going to have to learn because it is mission critical. All right. Other comments, questions, ideas?
M's back.
Yeah, M.
Did you put the link on the page already?
I am working on it as we speak.
Okay. I just will refresh in a little bit.
Yeah, not yet. If you're watching my screen, you can see me doing it as we speak. One of the things that I always think is really important that is completely unsexy and no one wants to talk about is, for me, it's the art of management and the necessity of having regular campaign committee meetings. And I think it's something that really helps to start early on in the process and to set a culture and an expectation in your campaign that, you and your treasurer, your key volunteers, whoever you've got, that, we're going to meet every Wednesday or every other Wednesday or whatever, and really stick to it have a facilitator, take notes, you know, use it as a way to sort of force yourself to focus on the campaign and to sort of move through that to-do list. I was doing that. That was the only role that I played last year on a statewide race for judge. And, you know, because I'm busy with a million other things, but I said the one thing I can do is I will facilitate calls every other Sunday night and keep that agenda and make sure that everyone else is, I mean, not make sure that everyone else is doing what they're doing, because I wasn't able to do that, but at least it came up in the conversation. What, you know, let's circle back around. Last week, Mary, you said that you would reach out to 3 people about the event happening in May. Have you done that? You know, because it's really easy, especially when we're mostly volunteer driven, for people to, you know, to talk a good talk. And in the moment, they think they're going to call 3 people. They want to call those 3 people. And then, oh, wait, they go back to their regular lives and work and family and, you know, things get in the way. And having that next meeting in some ways creates that sense of urgency where, oh, I've got to check these things off my to-do list because I'm going to be held accountable at the next meeting. And so I highly, highly encourage you, with whatever small group you've got, to start having regular team meetings. You know, if you're a local race, obviously meet locally in person is the best. If you're statewide, have conference calls, but have some sort of structure. Like, you know, in some ways, start running a campaign is like starting a small business. And at some level, you need staff meetings. You know, you need for people, the left hand has to know what the right hand is doing, and you only get that by communicating. All right, off my soapbox on that.
Well, thank you for that, Hillary, and thank you for the call. I have to prepare for my committee, which is meeting in 15 minutes.
Wonderful.
So, and I hope we'll be meeting every week.
Good.
From now, at least until the primary.
For sure, and hopefully past that as well.
Well, fingers crossed, indeed. Anyway, thanks a lot.
No problem. All right, other folks?
Hillary,
other
my
questions?
my next question is website.
That's all right. Go ahead.
So questions about websites?
Yeah.
Does anyone else want to take this?
Stack?
Yeah, Em, go right ahead.
Have one. That's the first thing. Have a website. Make sure the URL is something that makes sense for your campaign, similar to the bank account name. You want your website, and I think it's worthwhile to, even if you only pay to if you pay to register a URL or a domain name, excuse me, if you pay to register a domain name so that you can actually use that domain as the regular domain name and not as a subdomain to something like, Weebly or
WordPress
or something like that. So like just for example, you can get a WordPress account for $18 a year, paying for and register your domain name with WordPress. I think that's right. WordPress.com, something like that. Make sure you have correct and correctly spelled, with good grammar, information on the candidate bio. Make sure you have contact information, and if you use a form, make sure someone's checking it or checking the email where that goes, so that you don't want people sending you messages and no one gets them because no one's checking the email. If you're using a free number like a Google number, have it forwarded to someone's phone so that it always gets to a person. and someone doesn't have to go check the email to see if there's a message. Put your main issues, have some nice graphics if you can, don't go crazy. And big thing, have a donate button if you're running a campaign for which you are accepting donations. I mean, there are some people, particularly Greens, who say we're not accepting any donations, which is fine and makes the Treasury issue pretty simple since you don't have to deal with one. But if you do need money to, print signs or even, paying for a post office box, or if you're at the level where you're renting an office, and even paying the domain name or a host website, a hosting agreement or whatever, you're going to need money. So have a donate button. Make sure it works. Make sure it's tested by multiple people. Make sure if you're using PayPal, make sure your PayPal is connected to the correct bank account. And again, make sure it works. And I'll pause for a breath. Did I cover everything?
Jason Stack?
Yeah, Jason?
Yeah, and if you don't know how to make a website, don't try and learn. Find somebody that does. It usually does not go well when candidates are trying to put something together themselves when they're not used to the technology or not used to laying things out. You're much better off finding someone else who has some experience and working with them, sitting by them, and helping them develop the content portion.
Yeah. The other thing I will say is we actually had an entire call about campaign websites sometime last year, I believe. And so, again, if you go to the webinars page of the CCC website, which I'm pulling up right now, I find this website is always really slow to load. I don't know if other people have this. But there is a recording, and it was video. So we were sharing the screen, and the screen capture is part of that as well. And we basically talked about two different, this actually might be from 2 years ago, the one that I did with Sid, so developing a campaign website. And we talked about both what I would call more sophisticated websites, like something using Nation Builder, which has what a CMS, a content management system, like a WordPress, where you can build your website in Nation Builder. And then Sid has created a pretty simplistic but very accessible HTML set of pages that's sort of a little bit of like a campaign website in a box. That's all HTML and fairly like low tech. So I do agree with Jason. If this is not in your wheelhouse at all, this is a good thing for a volunteer. Don't try to learn something completely new on your own that you're not going to have time for. Did that answer your question, or?
Yeah, that was very good, very thorough. I appreciate it. Can I also ask about cards?
Yes, though I think there was somebody else who wanted to chime in. So why don't we let them ask the question, and then we can come back to business cards. Let them ask, and then we can come back. Was there someone else who wanted to ask a question before Laura?
Oh, maybe it was me. I was just wondering if we could cover at some point how we get on the GPUS website, those of us that are running for office. I noticed there's some people on there. I'm not on there, but other people are.
Well, so the first thing is we have to know that you exist and that you're running for office. And because we have a decentralized party. Just because your state party knows that you're running for office or your local party knows you're running for office, it doesn't necessarily mean that we know that you're running for office. Number one. And then number two, sometimes it's tricky, and we should be able at this point to just list any and all candidates, but sometimes it's tricky when there's primaries and people are not yet the endorsed candidate of their local or their state, and sometimes we have difficulty being able to list folks at that level. But to be honest, I don't think I even realized that we were putting up election. Are you talking about the elections database or this list of quote unquote 2018 candidates?
I was actually just talking about when I first opened up the website. Let's see, forget what page I was on.
And is this Carol from California?
But I noticed that there are some people like Angelica Duenas, who I know somewhat. She's another California person running for U.S. Congress, though. I'm running for the state assembly, and she's on here. But
now, do you just mean like her photo is front and center, or do you mean that?
And now I can't find my way back to that.
Right. Well, it flips. So mostly that's just a matter of like, we know her. She ran before. We know she exists. She seems to be running a campaign that's generating some attention. We have her photo on. Like that's not like an endorsement about her particularly, and it doesn't link to her website. It's just like a generic, graphic that happens to have her face. Now, if the more you send us, the more we're likely to then use it at some point. If you go to elections and then click on 2018 candidates, it just says it's a tentative unofficial list and submissions should be sent to our web manager. So literally I would just email webmanager@gp.org and make sure that,
Oh,
that
yeah, I'm not on here. Oh, I'm not on here.
Yeah, so we will fix that.
Okay, and send it to
right up at the top it says send to web manager. So I would just just a short email that's like, hi, this is my name, this is what I'm running for, a link to your website if you have one, something that can verify that you exist and that you're actually a green is helpful.
Okay. Very good. I'll do that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. This is still, fair. I mean, it's still a little early in the year, and we're still waiting for, stuff is trickling in. And so, I'm sure we have people in Pennsylvania that I know, and nothing's listed here at all. So. But this is partly how we get the word out.
Yeah, right.
Barbara Stack?
Yeah, Barbara?
Is there any way when a candidate presents himself or when there's a news release coming from a chapter of a state, is there any vetting that you require of us? Do the candidates have to have the state party also reaffirm that this is true or this release is true or whatever? Does the national party go through any of that?
No, I mean, I think we don't necessarily have like any strict guidance around that. I mean, obviously, I think, there's our own gut. Like, candidates release statements all the time, and if sometimes they release statements that, in our opinion, aren't really in keeping with green values. Like we're going to pass on that. If it's not well written, if it seems to not, if it's. I think in reverse, let me say this, if a statement that comes out is relevant to sort of national news, like it's relevant beyond just your one town, and it seems to be, like we want to essentially send the message to the larger green universe, like, see, this is the kind of stuff our candidates talk about, isn't that great? For the most part, I'm trying to think of like what we, vetting, like we're not doing fact checking necessarily. But I think we would, we're trying to search for campaigns that look serious and credible and authentic. And, for the most part, you know, whether or not, I mean, I guess I'm, you know, this comes up all the time, and it's always a dance because, you know, there are some places where there just isn't an organized local party, and so we don't want to not promote somebody because there's no other entity to kind of do some level of vetting.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, if the state party tells us, like, oh, we have this person running as a green, and we don't really like them, and we don't think they stole our ballot line, and we don't think they're, you know, a good candidate, you know, we will likely ignore them, you know, based on state party recommendation.
Okay.
But it's tricky because there could be contentious elections. You know, California being a good example with a primary system where there's like 3 different people running for governor. And we're trying to navigate how do we provide advice and support, but in an equitable way.
Mhm.
So, I don't know if I'm answering your question, but.
Well, I was just there was something on the website that I know from our state was a little exaggerated from what we can verify. So I was just wondering.
I would say just let us know. I mean, let us if you see something that you don't think is appropriate, and it even if it already went out, just let us know and we can review and take it down, or issue, you know.
Okay. All right. Thanks. Because there is an organization that would be over them as opposed to somebody out on their own kind of thing. Yeah. Okay. Thanks.
All right. Business cards. So is the question, should you get them?
Well, very much, it feels to me like you would need a card of some sort or a pamphlet or something to give people. And I'm just sort of questioning, what do you do? Barbara, and I know my phone says Laura, but it's really Joe.
All right. Barbara, yep. You want to answer?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I think what I've done and some other Connecticut people have done is that we have the business card and you have your kind of face and your, you know, what you office you're running for kind of thing, and your website and contact number and those kinds of things. And on the back, you highlight your issues. You know, you can get those cards for like $10 or $500 from a Vistaprint. And then you can have, that's easy for them to take, hand out on election day, because the bigger, in our state, the bigger the things that show you're specifically associated with a political party, you can't show any of that. You can't have a green button. You can't have literature poking out of your pocket or in your hand. So those kinds of things can be looked at really quickly. They're inexpensive. And then if you want to do pamphlets, or a third of a pamphlet or half a pamphlet, more specifically about your one particular agenda, or break it up, some of those things. You can do that in one page, or inside a page, or part of a page. So I think you can do both, and some of our people in Connecticut have done both. And so, you know, some things are more appropriate than others. Other people have done door hanging things when they're going door to door to campaign, and they say, "Sorry you aren't home. My name is Alan Breathen. I'm running for New Haven City Council. Please call me at this, or contact me on my Facebook page, or go to my website." Those kinds of things can also be done, and those are pretty inexpensive also at places that print out things. Does that help you answer? Help you answer some of your concerns?
Yeah, so I would just echo what Barbara said. You definitely want all kinds of different literature for different phases of your campaign. You know, pamphlets, door hangers, sometimes we call them quarter cards because you might be able to get 4 to a page if they're like, you know, just little small things.
Right.
But I do think business cards are actually really nice, particularly for the candidate. And we've had a local here in Pennsylvania and they just did it for their local. It wasn't for a particular campaign, but they created business cards that had, you know, their, you know, basic info, website, email, and then they put the 10 key values on them. And I always thought that was nice and, fits in your pocket easily. Depending on the type of event that you're going to as a candidate, like door knocking down the street, flyering in a neighborhood, business cards are going to be too small and get lost. But if you're at a social, like meet and greet kind of community setting where you're mixing and mingling and, you're meeting people in a setting where it might be more like a business networking event, then having a business card is a lot nicer than maybe handing someone a big flyer. So I think you just want to be, there's different audiences and different places, and they're going to sort of want and expect different kinds of things, and the more you can, customize and, and recognize and speak to that, the better off you'll be.
Jason Stack?
Yeah, Jason?
I would strongly recommend going with a union print shop so you can get the union bug on the card.
Right.
I know a lot of people do look for that. And when I was on the...
I can barely hear you.
Oh, sorry. Is that better?
Yeah.
And when I was on the steering committee for GPUS, we had business cards, and not only did we get the union bug on it, we made sure that we had the recycle symbol on it, and also had printed with vegetable-based inks and 100% wind power, and I think a fair amount of people did take notice to that.
Great.
I accidentally knocked myself off and came back again. I really appreciate the talk about the cards. Do I put a Green Party logo on it, or I only do that for the ones I hand out before the election?
Well, it's up to you. You can decide how much you want to make the Green Party front and center. Technically, do we have branding guidelines? Anyone can just use the chiclet, and the chiclet is what we affectionately call that diamond-shaped green diamond. I actually don't know, and I should. So, I mean, it doesn't, it's up to you. I would say, make sure just it looks, it's clean, it's easy to read, there was something else when you mentioned that, and I lost my train of thought. I'm sorry, but
that's all right. There's a lot of info there.
Yeah, it's all right. Think about. Are you putting your own personal cell phone on that business card, or an email address that's coming to you, your existing email? Like, just be careful. Like, you don't want to get slammed with calls and emails that you can't respond to.
Good point.
So Google Voice is a nice way to get like an anonymous number that can forward to your phone, but you're not actually giving out your phone number, so that when the campaign ends, your personal cell phone number is not floating out there. Nation Builder also will give you a phone number attached to your account.
Jason Stack?
Yeah, Jason?
Yeah, some campaigns will buy a phone for the campaign, a cell phone and a number.
Yep. I mean, a lot of these are just sort of based on your budget and how much you can afford. So one thing that, I would recommend is putting together what we would call like a 3-tiered budget. Like sort of, if I only raise a little bit of money, this is what we're going to do. If I raise a medium amount of money, we're going to do these things. And if I start raising a lot of money, then we're going to do it this way. And so it helps you plan and set some goals, it can help motivate fundraisers to sort of say like, oh, if we can get to this level, then we can do the tier 2 budget and have so many more things to play with. And it's just helpful to have that plan to know how you're going to spend money, and it also helps you raise money.
That's a good idea.
Yeah, that is good.
What is the question we should have been asking?
I don't know. I don't know about the question you should be asking, but I think the question I would ask you is, why are you doing this? Why do you really want to run for office? And it doesn't have to be to win, or it can be, there's 100 reasons to run for office, but I think you should really take some time to think about why you're running for office and what you really hope to accomplish. And I think what I wish candidates would spend more time doing is the realistic assessment of whether, if they have a chance of winning. And not to say that if you don't have a chance of winning, you shouldn't run. On the contrary, there's 100 reasons to run, even if you don't have a chance of winning. But to think about other reasons, like if you can win, fabulous, run to win, and please, do it. And that will lead you to one set of decision making, perhaps. Whereas if you are going to run for Senate, let's say, and you probably are not going to win that, then run because you're going to build the Green Party. You're going to make sure there's 10 new local chapters across your state by the end of your campaign. Have some sort of articulated goal, or you're going to bring in 10,000 new voters to the Green Party, or you're going to bring in, you're going to hit 5% so that your state makes, ballot access. I don't really care what the goal is, but have a goal, and then keep that front and center, because it's very easy to get distracted and to get caught up in, the things you might do. And I'm saying this is for the statewide campaign who's probably not going to win. At some point, you still get caught up in the momentum and start making decisions as if you're running to win, and you start abandoning and forgetting those other party building goals that you had, because it's really hard to do both at the same time. And so one piece of advice is to really think seriously about what your goal is. Maybe your goal is to push a particular issue, into the mainstream and to get the major party candidates talking about it, or to enact a certain policy change. Whatever your goal is, really think about it, and then, write it on a big piece of paper and stick it on your wall, and try to make sure that you're reminding yourself every day, that's the goal. And work from the end in mind, work backwards, work from the end in mind.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so my major goal, I think, is to put issues out there into the ether so that they do get discussed. They are part of the conversation, as well as aid the Green Party in ways that I can. Is that a valid goal, in your opinion?
Sure. Definitely.
I was telling my daughter that one of the reasons I'm running is because, well, it looks like I've got to do it myself.
Right. And that's a good reason, too. I mean, does anybody else want to comment on this?
Well, I think that's a really good suggestion that you made about keeping it really clear in your mind, what your goal is. And if you find that, it's kind of like what you said about the goals or the, you didn't use the word goals, but, if you reach different levels. With your fundraising or whatever, what your plan of action is, it's kind of, that could be reevaluated at certain stages if you end up, drawing more people in and raising more money than you anticipated. Maybe you might want to readjust it, but I think it's really good to to keep reminding yourself of what your overall goals are, and to not get distracted, like you say, because you can get kind of caught up in the momentum sometimes and begin to think that you're going to win when maybe you aren't, or
right.
maybe the chances are very slim. So anyway, that's my 2 cents.
Yeah, it's hard. I think it's very easy to get caught up in the momentum. It's very easy. I've also seen Greens do this, and I'm sure it's other candidates, other parties as well. The weakness of your opponent is not your strength. So I've been on numerous Green Party campaigns where it's like, the Democrat is so bad. They're corrupt. They almost went to jail. They're doing this. Everyone hates them, blah, blah, blah. All that may be true, and that doesn't make you a better option. Like, you have to be good in and of yourself. It's not just about, so yes, like, run because you can do a better job than those jokers, but you actually have to promote that and talk about it and show it. And convince people, because for most people, voting for a third party is not in their normal life experience. You have to really make the case. So, Laura, I would just say, like, a campaign where you're really trying to push issues, really think about that. Think about, if resources are limited, which they will be, how do you want to, like, what are the things that you might do to promote an issue-based campaign versus, a numbers and winning campaign or something, And so, what issues are they specifically? Try to maybe limit them to like 3 or 4, because at some point it's just things get, lost in the sauce. Pick your 3 or 4 top issues. You should be making sure that you're writing press releases, that you're making statements, that you're, showing up to the places where those issues matter. And maybe that's how you spend your time as a candidate, more so than knocking on doors and phone banking and whatever. And not that you wouldn't do those things also, but if you have a Saturday and you say, well, my big issue is, something related to schools and education, and there's this big education event happening, or I can go knock on doors, like that's when the goal helps you decide how you're going to spend your time. And so, it could be that, again, if education is an issue, like you're going to spend your time actually going to school board meetings and documenting what's happening and saying, if I was elected, things would be different because I'd be saying X, making statements after public meetings that are related to your issues, going to the neighborhoods that are affected by your issues, allying with organizations that are already working on those issues, whatever the case may be. And it's not, if you're running a campaign to win, you're doing that and also 20 other things. But it's just a different way of approaching it, whereas let's say if you're running to build the Green Party, then your focus is really on like getting volunteers to show up, giving people, tasks and getting people, like putting people to work on a campaign and helping them create some infrastructure and camaraderie and community building around the project that is your campaign. So
that's wise.
Well, all of this is way easier said than done, so let me just say that. Yeah,
Laura Suazo, could you talk about your experience with the radio ads and the radio interviews that you arranged for your candidates? Was that a good experience, and how do you think it helped? Or did you learn something that you do differently next time? Or
yeah, I didn't go to the interview with Melanie this morning, but it was a great experience for her. He filtered it out pretty well, and I thought it went good the way that the interview went. Anyways, I wanted to say good point about picking and choosing one event opposed to that over door knocking. Melanie, whom I am helping her out with her campaign, she's running for town council. Just last weekend, we ran into like a frustrating thing where she was at a meeting and I was trying to get a hold of her to know about door knocking. So anyways, we learned that there are some things where you have to put it off and do the other because it was very important for her to be at that meeting. And I shouldn't have really been pestering her when she was actually turns out to have been giving a speech. So that was hard on both of us, but I feel confident now that we did the right thing in choosing one more important thing over the other.
Right, and I think, to some degree, you learn those lessons the hard way. I mean, experience, as Miles Horton said, you only learn from the experiences you learn from. So please, reflect and think, and that's what those campaign meetings are about, is like what worked well in the last 2 weeks, what didn't work so well, how can we improve that? But I think the other thing is that what a candidate does and what the rest of you do are not the same thing. And so, not that the candidate should never be door knocking. I mean, door knocking is actually really important. But if there's an important meeting with key stakeholders or constituents or the media, that's where the candidate needs to be. The volunteers can go door knock. And so keep in mind, your candidate is in some ways your number one volunteer and opens doors and that other people can't. And so, your candidate is the one who's making high-dollar fundraising calls all the time. Your candidate is the one who's, giving press conferences and talking to the media. It doesn't mean that other things aren't happening. And at some level, you have to be able to do two things at once. But I think you're right. In that situation, the meeting was more important than the door knocking. So it's something that you'll kind of figure out over time in a very rushed environment where you only have until either a primary or to November to figure this all out.
MStack?
Yeah, M.
What time is the call scheduled to end?
Well, I was just going to say it's 10:15 here on the East Coast, so we can wrap it up now. We could go another 10-15 minutes. I don't really want to go much longer than that.
Okay.
So.
Well, I have a request. I know this is, for most people, it's early campaign stuff, but if maybe you or some more people with experience, if you're in the last week of the campaign, getting out the vote, it's like, are there like 3 key things for the last week of the campaign and getting out the vote? Over.
Yes. So I will say, and we have an entire call devoted to get out the vote. So let me, again, put in a plug for the GPUS CCC page and navigate to that and definitely, listen to that call. The general rule of thumb, and this is sort of in the campaigning to win mode of like trying to garner as many votes as possible on election day. You're constantly trying to bring you want to, as Lynn Serpy, who did one of our calls, said, you want to build your base, retain your base. Build your base, retain your base. So you want to keep everyone that's already with you, and you want to keep adding to that, right? And so campaigning from now until, assuming a November election, let's say late October, is you're trying to identify who will vote for you. Like, that is the essential project. You have a goal in mind. You have a number. You've done some number crunching. You need to get 10,000 votes in order to win. give or take, making that number up out of nowhere. And so every day is about, well, how am I going to find vote number 5, vote number 6, vote number 237, vote number 1085. You know, like you're constantly like, how am I going to get to that goal of 10,000 votes? It's knocking on doors, it's phone calling, it's going to meetings, it's all that stuff. When you're doing that, you know, and then get out the vote, it's fundamentally reminding the 10,000 people that you've hopefully identified and turning them out. And so it switches in the very last few days of the campaign from trying to convince people that they should vote for you, because at that point it's kind of almost too late, and instead you're focusing on the people who already said, yeah, I think you're good, I'm probably going to vote for you, and remind them to go do it, because voter turnout in this country is not so great. Particularly, 2018, the turnout will be better than last year. Odd number years is really low because, in some states there isn't even voting. In other states, it's like usually just local stuff. 2018, it will depend on where you are. Is there a hotly contested Senate race, a hotly contested gubernatorial race, or not? And if the answer is not, turnout might be pitiful because it's not a presidential year. And so you really have to push people to say, like, town council matters, like, get to the polls. And so, and get out the vote obviously also changes in different localities. If you have early voting, and a high percentage of people who are doing that changes the dynamics as well. But the general arc of campaigning is almost all the campaign is identifying people who will vote for you, convincing folks, marking them, and if you're really doing this, you have a spreadsheet, a tracking system, like I knocked on Sally's door, Sally is a 5, she's definitely voting for me. And then, I knocked on Joe's door, he hates my guts, he's definitely not voting for me. Get out the vote is reminding Sally that she said she would vote for you, and election day is Tuesday, come out and do it. And ignoring Joe. He's not voting for you, like, forget him. It's his civic responsibility to remember to vote, not your responsibility to remind him. So yeah, if you want that in more depth, there's a get out the vote call. There's also calls that are sort of related on voter targeting and voter identification.
Can I ask again? What was the last thing that we said about the form about reporting? Where did you?
So I put that, so if you go, and I'll put the link in the chat box here, the Coordinated Campaign Committee website on gpus.org, and there's a link here for documents. And so what I did is I put up what we're calling our campaign in a box, which is very, very, very much in development. It's basically a Google Drive with the different folders. Essentially what Holly and I did is we went through our computers one night and we said, oh, we have an old flyer from some campaign I worked on in 2003, and we like plopped it in there. So there's different, miscellaneous document flyers, sample emails that are like thank yous to volunteers, budget documents, like just miscellaneous stuff that we've gathered over the course of both of our 15 plus years in the Green Party working on campaigns. And so, with the idea being that it's much easier to take what somebody else did and tweak it and adapt it for your own usage than to start from scratch. Right. And then I highlighted this financial template since we talked about that tonight.
Now, is that under, again, I never did find my way quite to that. Under the Green Party of the U.S., under committees, if you scroll down then to Coordinating Campaign Committee.
Yep.
And then you click on that link and then...
And then documents.
Okay.
And then CCC documents.
Okay.
So the documents page is good, and then the webinars page has recordings of a lot of these calls. Now, granted, they're kind of dry. I mean, it's literally just a raw recording of the conversation. But if people had a PowerPoint or some other visual, then it will show up as a video recording. If it was just audio, then it'll be just audio. But, if there's something specific that you're looking for, like the websites or, fundraising, it is a good way to sort of get up to snuff pretty quickly. The other thing that's up here, so I had the pleasure of going down to Orlando in October, and, myself and Erin Fox, who's from Michigan, we did a 2-day campaign school training in Florida, and they videotaped part of it. So we do a Running for Office 101, and there's a video of that on this website as well. And then if you want more in depth on goal setting, Erin's presentation on that is here as well.
And the donor, I'm just looking at your form right now, the donor tab. These are the categories that we need for reporting purposes then, right? Name, address.
Generally speaking, I don't want to speak for your state's campaign finance, but generally speaking, it's occupation and employer.
Yeah, in addition to their name and their address and so forth.
Yes, usually it's name and address, not phone number or email. I just put that in because you might want to be able to call someone or send them an email 5 weeks later saying it's time to donate again.
Right.
So that's just in there. But and then the thanked category is more like, did you send them a thank you? Checkbox. Yes, I did, or no, I haven't done that yet. And I've used this to then also do a mail merge. With Sherry's campaign, we were getting a lot of donations, even by check. And so, I had some generic thank you letter, and then I would download, the latest sheet, and I would do a mail merge, and it would just spit out 20 thank you letters. So which in that case, I think I had amount also in there. And I might just add that here, because the amount piece gets tricky. So here in Pennsylvania, I don't have to itemize donations under $50. So if you write me a check for $25, and somebody else writes a check for $25, and somebody else writes a check for $25, I can say I got $75 in unitemized donations, and I don't have to report anything. But if you write me another check for $30 and now you're at $55, I have to report both donations because you're cumulatively over $50. So in my experience, it behooves you to track everything, every donation, even if it was small. And then, when the thank you, when I did the mail merge, I would, dear so-and-so, thank you for your recent donation of, and then you plop in. So it's helpful to have that field in the same sheet. So the amount should be in here. You're going to put it in here now. Just did.
Okay, so I'll refresh it.
And then what I would do is save a copy of this. This is a generic template that's available. Hopefully it's read only and you can't actually edit it, but save a copy so that you're not putting your campaign's information in here for the whole world to see.
Oh, right. Yeah, of course. Yeah. It has, if I want to copy the document, it says copy of financial template, and then it says folder My Drive, which I don't.
Right. So that's I don't know if you've ever used Google Drive, but that's it's basically putting it in your set of documents. So yes, you want to put it in your drive.
Or I could put it on my computer.
Yeah, you can also just download it and put it in Excel, and that's easy.
Yeah, that's what I'd rather do. Yeah, okay. And let me see if it's done.
All right. Well, I think that music is telling us that it's time to go.
Well, thank you very much. It was very helpful.
No problem.
Yeah.
We will hopefully, I think we are scheduled to have a call on media, media relations, probably exactly a month from tonight, so March 27th. We try to do these on the last Tuesday of the month or the fourth Tuesday, I guess, depending.
Will the call-in number be the same?
Yes, it should be.
Okay, great. Yeah, that makes it easier. Okay, wonderful.
Thanks very much, Hillary.
No problem.
All right. Yeah, thanks a lot.
Yeah, thanks, Hillary.
Thanks to Jason, Holly, Em, and Barbara, the other committee members who also chimed in as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, all of you.